All right, everybody, welcome back to part 3 of case 2 on our podcast, Real Estate and Murder.
Real Estate and Murder.
Which is a podcast about
Real estate and murder.
Yeah. So we have been covering the case of Todd Kohlhepp, who is a real estate agent broker and serial killer extraordinaire. And in the first 2 parts of this case, we covered his childhood, his upbringing, his first criminal offense, first convicted, I'll say, like we truly don't know if there was more crimes. We covered a little bit about his education and when he got out of prison and moved back to South Carolina. So here we are. We're going to take you all the way to about 2015. So Todd has been living back in South Carolina for well over a decade at this point.
15 years.
Yeah, he came back in 2001?
2002.
He has opened his own brokerage, and he is a locally well-known, at least from what people have said, somewhat well-known real estate agent. And Todd's picked himself up a couple hobbies over the time that he's been out and come back to South Carolina. One of them was deciding to ride a motorcycle, which didn't go very well.
Yeah.
Didn't really pull it off. And secondly, he's decided to pick up a hobby of kidnapping and murdering people.
Yeah.
So this final part is going to be sort of the resolution of Todd's story. And when I say story, we're going to talk about the next part of his life in which his crime sprees come to an end.
The culmination of his terror on the community.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He is still in prison right now. And so he tries to continue his own story. But we're going to take you to the part of Todd's life in which everything unravels and falls apart. And when I say that, he absolutely gets what he deserves. So I'm not giving him any sympathy.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends. Like, you know.
Sure. He could. I think what you're saying is he could have gotten a lot worse.
Yeah.
Okay, true. Just another trigger warning at the top of this part. We issued a trigger warning in the first part of this case because Todd is a very violent, disgusting criminal. There's no other word for it.
No,
And I just want to note, though, again, that as we move into this section, there's going to be a lot of details that are actually relevant to the story. And so we're going to tell those stories with respect, of course. But just be aware that the continuing story, I guess I should say, of Todd Kohlhepp includes a lot of violent rape, captivity, sexual abuse, and murder.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Amy, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a couple named Johnny and Megan Coxey. They were a couple that lived in the close area, like the close proximity to Todd Kohlhepp.
Okay.
Johnny is 29 and Megan is 26, although I do want to note that a couple of sources actually reference them as 25 and 28. I don't know if the discrepancy there is maybe that they had birthdays between like the time of their missing and the time of them being found.
Sure.
So I'm not sure if one age refers to like the age they were when they died versus the age when they were found. Yeah. I did just want to note that, though, because we do try and take the research very seriously and make sure that we get it right.
Yeah.
Either way, they were a young couple. They were very in love. Those who knew them have said that they were just a great fit for each other. They had similar interests, one of which was they both loved tattoos, and they wanted to open a business, a tattoo shop together someday. And so Megan's mother said they would always practice on each other.
Yeah.
They were just living their lives, right? Johnny had a daughter named Madeline, and Megan had a son named Andrew, and then together they had a son named JJ.
Okay.
And JJ was still very young. He was just a few months old. He was born in September of 2015. And unfortunately, Johnny and Megan had a history or habit of using drugs. I don't want to get too far into that. You know, I do want to just tell their story as two human beings, to, you know, a mom and a dad who lost their lives tragically. Although I am noting it because it comes up in all of the sources and the research as a part of their history. And I'll explain a little bit why.
Well, I think what you're trying to say is that just because someone may or may not use drugs doesn't mean that they're any less member of society.
Absolutely.
And any less deserving of life versus having their life cut short.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to say it. And unfortunately, we do see that often in the true crime realm.
Yeah.
Where because of certain habits or past habits, whatever you want to call it, a life might not be valued the same way. And we don't take that stance.
No.
Not on this podcast or in our lives. And so I'm not going to reference it too much, although I do want to note in December of 2015, Johnny and Megan were both arrested, although at different times. Johnny was arrested on the 10th of December. Megan was arrested on the 18th. Megan was arrested and being charged with child neglect. Unfortunately, their little boy, JJ, had tested positive for heroin. So I will leave it at that. I don't want to discuss, again, too much like their drug habit or even their choice of drug, but that's what Megan was arrested for. I haven't been able to find anywhere if Johnny was arrested for the same charge or for something different. But I would assume that it was probably the same or very similar charge, right? It doesn't, nothing stands out as different. And they were arrested within 8 days of each other.
Wow.
So Megan actually met Todd Kohlhepp or came in contact with Todd Kohlhepp at the Waffle House. Megan was a waitress there. And she and other waitresses were at a point with Todd where they were so uncomfortable with him that they actually would refuse to serve him. And
a male cook would come out and take Todd's order because he was so creepy.
Right.
With the waitresses.
Yeah. And they were all uncomfortable. I do want to note that there are several employees of that Waffle House who've come forward and said, I know for a fact that's where Megan and Todd crossed paths. And that's important because Todd's narrative later on, and even it comes up in the police department's narrative, is that Megan and Johnny were panhandling and that's how they came across Todd. Now, I'll get into that more a little bit. But we're going to go with the story that witnesses give us, which is that they met at the Waffle House. Todd was a frequent customer there. And as a matter of fact, his order was well known. And I'm just going to bring this up. Sometimes we need to just have a little bit of a release from the seriousness of this topic. But his order was well known to be 6 scrambled eggs. Each egg had to have its individual portion of cheese added to it. That's a lot of food.
Also, too, like, that's very specific. And how would he know
if a portion didn't match an egg? Yeah, I don't know. But that came up in one of the sources, which I actually enjoyed listening to very much. And that would be the Serial Killer podcast. So shout out to that. Megan and Johnny both went missing on or about December 19th. Now, I'm saying on or about because not only are there some varying accounts in the information we have, but they're varying because no one knows for sure when they crossed paths or actually made the decision to meet one-on-one with Todd Kohlhepp.
Yeah.
But Megan was last seen on December 19th. Now, again, remember she was arrested on the 18th, right? So Megan actually reached out to her mom, whose name is Mary, and begged her mother to bail her out of jail.
Is that because she had a job that she was going to go do?
Yes. So she said to her mom, please, 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 can you bail me out? I actually already have a job lined up and I don't want to miss the opportunity to make some money, especially now. I'm going to need it. And her mother...
What kind of job was she going to go do?
So she had been...
You mentioned she was a waitress, but...
She was a waitress. She had been asked by Todd Kohlhepp to come to his property and do some cleaning of interior and exterior or both on his property. So after that had been offered to her and Johnny, they were arrested. And so she, as a part of being arrested, she gets to make a phone call, right? So she reached out to her mother and begged her to bail her out. Now, it is very hard in all of these documentaries, podcasts that we watch and listen to hear the parents discuss the loss of their child, right?
Or the what if scenario.
The what ifs. It's very tragic. So I do just want to note that her mother speaks openly about her regret for bailing Megan out. She says, I wish I would have just left her there because she would have been safe. So, of course, absolutely not putting any blame on what would have, could have, or should have happened. But she bailed Megan out. It doesn't specify if she also bailed Johnny out or if Johnny was just released. But either way, they are now out of jail. And they are going to Todd Kohlhepp's property to do some work. They arrive at the property, we're assuming on December 19th, okay? And Todd's story, this is kind of where I'm going to have to take it from here, to be honest with you, because unfortunately, Megan and Johnny are not here to speak for themselves. So we have to go with the story, although we can put our own speculation in there, right? But according to Todd, they arrive at the property and Todd is out showing them what he wants them to work on. They're outside the home at this point. And apparently, according to Todd, Johnny pulls out a knife and threatens to rob him. Whether this is true or not, we just do not know.
Yeah.
My assumption, given what happens from here on out, was that Todd was always planning on murdering both of them. But his story is that they were just there to work. They tried to rob him, and so he did what he had to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we all know Todd loves to victim blame.
Yeah, and shame.
And shame. And in all of his interrogations, interviews, and letters that he continues to write from prison, he states that the only people that he killed were basically the lowest of low, the scum of the earth. I am not saying that.
Yeah.
That is what Todd refers to. It was said in one source that Todd knew Megan had been arrested for child neglect because her baby tested positive. Now, I do not know if that's because the baby tested positive before and then some time maybe went by and then she was arrested. I don't know how Todd would know that. But this source claimed that he knew that. And so he then took it upon himself to kind of rid the world of these two undeserving humans, right? Which is not...
It's not appropriate.
Not acceptable, like not even within the realm of...
what a regular person thinks about doing.
Right. Like it's so assumptive. I mean, it's also like playing a God role, right? Like,
yeah. Like he gets to be the judge, jury, and executioner.
Exactly. That's exactly right. But again, according to Todd's story, they attempted to rob him. As a response to this, here's where the story gets a little bit stupid, right? So he says in his response, he shot Johnny in the chest. Well, that means that he had a gun on him. Why would you have a gun on you if you didn't assume that there was any risk? Again, he wasn't allowed to carry, concealed carry, or open carry.
Yes, because of his...
Right, because of his felon status.
Yeah.
And that actually comes up later in life. He was actually getting those guns illegally. And so either way, like the story doesn't make sense at that point. Because what'd you do? Run into your house, grab a gun, come back out, shoot Johnny? No, Johnny, I'm so sorry. It was on his body. Okay,
Yeah.
so he shoots Johnny, buries him in a grave, and then takes Megan captive and says he had to take her captive. He didn't want to kill her because she's a woman. So he's generously not going to kill Megan at this point.
Good grief.
But he doesn't know what to do with her because she witnessed him murdering Johnny. So he decides he's going to hold her captive in the same Connex that Kayla Brown was discovered in. Todd holds Megan captive for 6 days. He tells his story to not only his mother, but to others, that Megan was combative, argumentative, and, quote, had a smart mouth. And that is why he killed Megan. He does say that on day 6, when he decided to take her life, that she had pissed him off and put him in danger because she set the Connex on fire with cigarettes that he had purchased for her as a favor. Again, he's being generous, right? He's going to take care of this captive he has.
And you know, honestly, like we've mentioned before, everybody reacts different, but good for her for fighting back.
Absolutely. She wasn't going down. She was going to push back against this human being. She had witnessed something traumatic.
Yeah, her long-term boyfriend,
her
father,
husband, they were married. Yeah.
Father of her child, is viciously gunned down right in front of her.
Right. And so she absolutely made whatever stink she could. I don't know what other word to use. I'm sorry. But in an effort to, again, fight him, get out of the situation she was in, whatever it was. So on day 6, he decides that he has to kill her. He does state, I knew at that moment it was me or her, which is, again, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let's just note at this point in his life, Todd is a 300-pound man. And we're talking about, you can see photos online of Johnny and Megan. She was this beautiful, vibrant, but young, petite girl. Yeah. It was not you or her.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, victim, like trying to blame everything else for what he was forced to do.
Yeah.
He kills Megan. He shoots Megan in the head and he buries her right next to Johnny. I do want to say he buries them very deeply in the ground, and that comes up later when their bodies are discovered. They are not discovered until 2016 when Kayla is rescued. Nobody knew that they were there. Missing persons reports had been filed, but there was no trace back to Todd Kohlhepp. And so it was never even up for discussion.
He wasn't even on the radar.
Right. And they were recovered, some reports say around November 5th and or 6th. And there's a variance there because they had to dig for quite a long time to recover the bodies. Yeah. And so that's almost a full year. It's 11 months that they were missing. I do just want to note right here that Megan's mom, who's obviously like in fear and so I'm sure, sad, very struggling with both of them being missing. But of course, her child, Megan, right? She did ask the Spartanburg Police Department to ping her phone, Megan's phone, to see where it was last. Now, the Spartanburg Police Department did not do that. And it is asked later.
Isn't that standard for missing persons? Like, isn't that just...
If there is an effort and an attempt to recover a missing person, yeah. I mean, it's 2015. At this point, everyone has a phone.
Yeah.
It is asked later on, actually by the investigative journalist that we both really enjoyed her work. Maria, she asks the sheriff, actually, why did you not ping her phone? Now, the sheriff has to actually get up and go ask the investigators that were in charge of the recovery case at that point. And they said that they refused to ping her phone. I'm using air quotes right now, because they believe she did not have one, because they believe that she was panhandling.
They bought Todd's story of panhandling.
Well, and at the point when mom is asking them to ping her phone, they don't yet know that Todd had killed them. But whatever, someone has the account out there that they were panhandling. Therefore, the police department assumed that they didn't have a phone.
Interesting. Did the mom fight back?
I'm going to say that I'm not sure.
Not fight back, but maybe push back. Like, I paid for the phone, or...
Yeah, she did, actually. She said to the police, who also said, well, we can't ping her phone because that's her private information.
So we're getting two different stories now.
And the mom says to the police, I pay for her phone. Doesn't that make it my property? And they told her no.
Interesting.
Now, Megan and Johnny had already been murdered at that point. And so...
But to give the family closure, 11 months earlier would have been... So at least on the radar, it probably would have saved Kayla.
It could have. Exactly. What it could have done is, for one thing, brought closure to their missing status much sooner. But also, would have prevented the crimes that we're going to talk about next. So, and, we're not coming for the Spartanburg Police Department. Again, we're telling the story that's being told to us.
Yeah.
But it seems like there were definitely some either errors or missteps.
It's easy to look at a case through the lens of hindsight 2020.
It is.
Right?
It is. So when Megan and Johnny were exhumed, when their bodies were exhumed, they were actually identified by their tattoos, the ones that they loved so much. Megan has a tattoo on her hip that says Andrew, and one that says Maddie, which were the two children that they were raising together. And I just want to note, they actually needed cadaver dogs and heavy machinery in order to recover their bodies. I'm bringing that up because they were buried deep enough in the earth that there wasn't visual ease at finding their burial site.
Well, because they had been for 11 months.
Yeah, they'd been there for a while, but also Todd went far enough to cover his tracks. So he covered their burial site enough that it wasn't
like a
clear.
Depression.
Yes. And a part of that was that their bodies were almost mummified, is the word that was used in the autopsy report, in clay. And so it was very hard to recover their bodies.
Wow.
And so they were identified, both of them, by their tattoos. So that's what we know about Johnny and Megan. And of course, regardless of how they got there or why they got to that property, they were, well-deserving human beings who did not... There's no justification for the ending of their lives.
It did not deserve the ending that is their story.
So, Amy, next we have the final piece of Todd's monstrous acts.
Yeah, hit the climactic end to his community terror.
Yeah, so we're actually going to go back to where we started telling the story in part 1. We're going to go to the ending here. So can you tell us a little bit about Charlie Carver and Kayla Brown?
Yeah, so Charlie Carver was 32 years old. He is from Anderson, South Carolina. Charlie's dad, Chuck Carver, describes Charlie as a funny in a nerdy kind of way. He liked to make people smile and was a big LSU football fan. Charlie at the time was going through a divorce, and he had been married to a woman named Nikki for 3 years, but they separated May of 2016. And Kayla Brown was a mutual friend of theirs. So Charlie and Nikki separate, and then him and Kayla, we're not really sure the timeline, but they start dating sometime that summer.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah. Todd had hired Kayla and Charlie to clear brush on his land in Woodruff. And Woodruff is the 95 acres of land that Todd owned in Spartanburg County.
Yeah, that he said was supposed to be his playland.
Yeah, just like his escape. Charlie was supposed to visit his dad on August 31st. He never showed or called. On Saturday, September 3rd, Charlie's mom, Joanne, called Chuck and asked him if he had heard from Charlie. Chuck said no. Chuck reaches out to the apartment manager where Charlie and Kayla were living and asks her to go check on their apartment. There was no one there. Kayla's dog was found inside the apartment without any food or water. That afternoon, Joanne called Chuck and said that it was time for them to file a missing persons report on Charlie. And about 10 days or 2 weeks after they report Charlie missing, Facebook posts start popping up. The Facebook post reads things like, quote, "Kayla's fine, we're fine, leave us alone, we're getting married." His dad felt the post was not from Charlie because it wasn't like him to post something like that, and Charlie and Nikki were not divorced yet. Charlie's friends and family find out that a few days before police got access to Charlie and Kayla's apartment, the manager found Nikki, his estranged wife, right, in the apartment, and she was taking Charlie's laptop.
Ooh, Nikki was having a hard time letting go.
I guess. A scorned woman, maybe? Shortly after Nikki had removed Charlie's laptop was when the odd Facebook posts started. Posts like, quote, "We are expecting a baby girl July 1st. And sometimes late at night, I dig a hole in the backyard to keep the nosy neighbors guessing."
Oh my gosh.
Like, seriously. The family felt Nikki had some involvement in Charlie's disappearance. On August 31st, Nikki had posted, "Rest in peace, my beloved husband. I'll see you again one day," on her personal Facebook post.
And August 31st is the day that they are known to be missing.
They noticed that he was, because he didn't show up to his dad's.
Well, and that was the day that they had arranged to work for Todd,
yes,
right? So yeah.
Yes.
We know it's the 31st, and this lady either is psychic or posts something in an effort to confuse people.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of specific. Rest in peace, my beloved husband.
We don't hear from Nikki, although we see footage and, you know, we kind of see a little bit more about her story or her involvement in the story. She's a little bit of a red herring. Let's just say that up front, you know.
Sure.
She's known to not have involvement. However, the family was very suspicious of this. Therefore, they report that to the police. The police are suspicious of this now.
And all of the Facebook posts that are posting from Charlie's Facebook are coming from Nikki's IP address.
Yeah, they found that out later. Mm-hmm. You know, they were able to track it down. Those things take time.
Yeah. So Nikki gave the detectives false leads and information, saying Charlie was at the beach. Like, he's not dead. Like, go check him out. Like, whatever.
Which, can we just tie in there then? Like, Todd posted, like, he made a couple comments or posts on social media saying, "They're not missing, they're at the beach. So-and-so said they're at the beach." Ugh. Like, he was following what people were posting about them. Todd's an idiot.
Yeah, well, or, I mean, I guess if someone else is an idiot, he's just playing along, you know, like, like, let's go down this red herring with them.
When I say idiot, the move that he makes where he and we'll find out later, right, that he's the one posting some of these posts. Nikki was doing some of it, but he was posting, and he had
on
Kayla.
Charlie's?
Well, he actually had Kayla log into her Facebook and made some posts.
Posting on Kayla's.
Which was one of the downfalls, right? Because people were noticing this is not normal, and people were actually commenting back.
Where are you?
Yeah.
Okay. So Nikki called Charlie's cell phone provider asking for the cell records after he goes missing. She impersonates a police officer. She is charged with that crime and found guilty and is given a $2,000 fine. And so what is going on? The family, Charlie and Kayla's family, are very, very active in calling the police, giving the police cell phone information, all of this stuff. Now, all of this is happening from Anderson, South Carolina.
Which is close by.
It is close by, same county. However, they have to go through the Anderson Police Department.
Right.
And there's an officer there that decides on October 18th of 2016 to get involved in this missing persons. And he requests cell phone records. And it takes about 2 weeks to get in. But as he's reviewing these records, he realizes, because Todd has asked Kayla to log into her Facebook page, and because Kayla had put on her Facebook that they were going to Todd Kohlhepp's property to go clear brush. And he is the last known person that
would have
people,
seen them with.
have seen them with. They decide to then do a broader search and kind of correlate where Kayla's phone is versus where Todd's phone, and they narrow it down to
The Woodruff property.
The Woodruff, which Todd owns. And so that's where in our story, search warrants are then issued for Todd's residence where he is currently living in Moore, and the Woodruff property where Kayla's phone is known to have pinged.
Right. And the Spartanburg Police Department and the Anderson Police Department actually work together on those search warrants.
Yeah, so it's like city versus county.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes you have like the local municipalities have jurisdiction over some things, but they can bring in bigger people.
Yeah, and they
to
were
kind of support.
They were team working it because they make it clear, like they made a conscious decision to serve these search warrants at the exact same time.
Simultaneously, yeah.
Yeah, and again, you see the officers that rescue Kayla, and so you could just tell from the way they're interacting that they really are invested. Like they really are putting in every effort they can to find this couple. And they're looking for these pings, these cell phone pings, right? But they're also looking for Charlie's vehicle, which was missing, right?
Yeah, they do an aerial search and they over Todd's property. It's 95 acres. It's South Carolina. It's very wooded.
Heavily wooded
land.
land.
They're looking for something that could be identified, and they actually don't see anything from the air. They eventually will find things when they have boots on the ground in there. And
we're referencing the heavily wooded land, which is actually why that Connex stood out so much.
The green, because it was a green long.
Yeah, but it's just dropped in the middle of this huge property, right?
Yeah.
There was also a garage, we'll say, just because that shows up. But
yeah.
Keep going.
On November 3rd, they served the search warrants. And like we said at the beginning of part 1, Kayla had been held captive for 65 days. And when they go in and rescue her, she tells police that Todd shot Charlie 3 times in the chest, wrapped him in a blue tarp, put him in the bucket of the tractor, and then locked Kayla in the green Connex. So she doesn't know where Charlie is at in connection with the 95 acres, but she knows that he has been killed.
He's there somewhere.
And so it actually takes police 2 days to find Charlie's body, and they find it a ways away from where Kayla is found. Todd had like a shooting range almost set up with little targets, and they find his body near there. And the family is there, and police are gathering and letting them know the information. And then this is the part where it gets a little more gruesome, if people can imagine the story. But the family finds out through the autopsy report that Charlie's feet were missing. And it bothers his dad so much that Chuck calls the coroner to talk about it. And there was no way that this was done by an animal. There wasn't any teeth marks. And they were not cut off either, as there were no saw marks. And the coroner describes it as if you were twisting your arm. And you know how when you twist it, your skin kind of turns a little bit?
Right.
He said it's like the feet were just twisted until they came off.
Right. So there was no clean cut. They weren't, like you said.
No, and the skin you could see that was twisted. Rusty Clevenger, who is the Spartanburg County coroner, says there was notable damage done to one of the bodies by the backhoe, but not in the area of the feet of both Charlie and Johnny. So Johnny's feet are also missing, feet and shoes. He also said he had his personnel using 5-gallon buckets sifting through their burial sites trying to locate their feet. To this day, Charlie and Johnny's feet have never been found.
Whew.
I know. Sorry, guys.
No, I mean, we decided that we wanted to at least mention it because, for one, Todd denies it.
Oh, he totally does. In fact, Todd, he's so gross. He makes a comment that says, "My mother taught me never to play with food."
Which, why would you say something like that?
It's disgusting.
Because he's denying doing it, but then he's also referring to it as food. He's callously referring to it like that.
Yeah, and that's what he told detectives when they came back. Because Todd, of course, is arrested when they find Kayla. And immediately, because, you know, she's been found. He's at least arrested on kidnapping charges.
Well, yeah, and initially, they find her while he's still being questioned at his home. And actually, you see a detective step out, take a phone call, and come back in. And he says, "Okay, Todd, we found Kayla Brown on your property." And Todd is Todd. And so
he's trying to, like, I don't know what. Yeah.
How? I don't know what you're talking about. So they arrest him in that moment. Todd is never free again.
Yeah. Later, just to finish this, Todd writes to Maria Avis and says, I kill, I don't play with bodies. This isn't Criminal Minds, no trophies. All parts were attached when I put them in the ground. I think the backhoe they dug them up with did that. I didn't cause that. And I think John Douglas, like, again, we can go down this analysis paralysis thing, but I think John Douglas puts it best when he says serial killers are not going to give up all the information. They're going to keep some secrets to themselves.
Yeah, that's true. And also Chuck, who is Charlie's dad, who is, I just want to note, like, he's so, like, selfless to go on and share this story. And I say selfless. Tender. Yeah, it's very tender. Like, he obviously loves his son so much in the way that he speaks about him, which has to be just very hard.
Well, he was so thrilled that Kayla was found, because he actually was called to say we found Kayla, and he was so excited, and he had hopes that his son was also going to be found alive.
Yeah, he does say in one interview that when he picked up the phone and they said, "We found Kayla," he was so thrilled. And then it only took him a few minutes, like seconds, to realize they only said Kayla's name. But he did make a good point in one of the interviews that it's ridiculous that Todd is stating that the feet would be removed by the heavy equipment, the machinery that was digging the bodies out, because how would a machine like that remove the feet in exactly the same place
on two separate individuals,
and then the feet weren't found? So it doesn't make any sense. It's an excuse. And I know it was tough for us to decide if we wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, we had a long phone conversation yesterday.
We did, but we wanted to bring it in the story because I believe, you know, Todd was caught on accident. Todd didn't mean to get caught. So to me, removing the feet actually shows an escalation. Now he's not just murdering people. Now he's starting to dismember or remove body parts. And so we're seeing an escalation of violence.
The male victims.
Right. So
Megan's feet were still attached.
Right. So which also plays into, well, obviously the machine didn't do it then because Megan and Johnny were right next to each other.
Yeah.
Anyway, who knows if Todd had not been caught, what he would have then escalated to continue to do.
I mean, during Kayla's trip to the hospital, right, because she is in need of medical attention after being locked away for 65 days.
Yep.
She lets police know that Todd has confessed to her that he has killed the people at Superbikes, the motorcycle shop. She doesn't know the name of it, but she says he did kill 4 individuals at a motorcycle shop.
Yep. And then all of a sudden, a possible resolution to the Superbike motorsports murders.
Almost 13 years to the day.
Right. And in no point in his story does Todd deny that he was there.
No, part of Todd's confession for Superbikes is that, and this again is Todd's story, he bought a motorcycle from them. He went back to the bike shop and told them he was having a hard time riding the bike. He was having buyer's remorse, and the employees made fun of him. And then it was stolen in front of his apartment complex 14 days later. And Todd went back to the bike shop, and he felt the manager, Brian Lucas, was teasing him. And Todd felt that they were the ones that had stolen his bike. Todd decides that they need to pay, which is such an extreme reaction to probably friendly guy humor.
But whatever he interpreted as insults.
Yes.
Yeah.
Todd returns to the bike shop under the guise that he is going to purchase another bike. He says he is sitting on a black Kawasaki Katana 600, stalling while their customers left and only the employees and the owners at the bike shop were there. And there is a customer. Sarah, why don't you tell us about that customer that Todd was waiting for to leave?
Yeah, so there was a man that was at the Superbike store. His name is Kelly Sisk. And he was there doing some kind of transaction. I believe it referenced getting something for his son, like a four-wheeler.
A go-kart, I think.
Go-kart, yeah, something like that. So he states like he left the motorsports dealership at about 3 p.m. He does say after Todd has been, apprehended and the community now knows that Todd was the murderer.
Yeah, he had given the police a sketch.
Yeah, he had done his best to describe what this other man walking around the store was. So what we're saying is Kelly was in the store at the same time as Todd.
Yeah.
But Todd states he did not want to kill a customer. He was there to specifically kill
all the employees,
which John Douglas stated.
Yeah.
So Kelly Sisk says, 13 years later, as we now know that Todd Kohlhepp was the murderer, if I had seen a picture of Todd Kohlhepp, I would have immediately been able to identify him. And we know, like police sketches, I'm sure those artists do the absolute best they can, but it's really hard, I'm sure, for a witness or a victim to try and describe, like, what does a chin look like?
Yeah. Well, and just think like without the person sitting in front of you, like me trying to describe someone even as close as we are, me trying to describe to a sketch artist what you look like, I'm sure would look extremely inaccurate according to like what you actually look for.
And you've even questioned before, if you go missing, could your husband describe you?
Oh, no.
Not because he's not amazing, but it's hard.
You guys, I cut my bangs and he didn't even notice. Like,
sorry, Jonathan.
Sure, he's not going to be able to
describe a missing person. Oh, goodness. Sorry, Jonathan. We had to throw you under the bus for a moment of laughter here because this is dark. But Kelly's account is important because he says he leaves the shop right around 3 p.m. And then by the time Noel arrives at the property, which is not too far.
Noel says he's right around 3 o'clock. So it's literally minutes. It's again like the Lindsay Buziak case, within minutes.
Yep, they die very quickly.
Yeah.
Todd's attack is
aggressive,
but it's 1, 2, 3, 4. He just goes, right down the line.
So back to his account, he tells them that he'll purchase the bike. The mechanic takes the bike in the back and gets it cleaned up and ready for Todd to take home. Todd follows the mechanic back there. He shoots Chris Sherbert twice, and the other 3 come towards the back thinking like, oh, what is that sound? We've got to go investigate. And Todd opens up the doors that separate where the mechanic was and the showroom and sees the 3 people coming towards him, and he shoots Beverly next, and he describes shooting her 2 or 3 times in the chest, and then Scott and Brian then run towards the front door and Todd shoots Brian first, and then Scott, the owner, is the last one that he shoots. Todd says that the reason why the police didn't find any DNA at Superbikes is because he used his knuckles instead of his hands to open the door. And when he was prepping the bullets, he wore 2 pairs of gloves.
Again, planned.
It's very well
thought out.
Yeah, and he had broken up the Beretta he used, and somewhere in my notes I have the exact same, like
a 92.
Yeah, whatever Beretta gun he had. And he had broken up the parts and kind of distributed them in different garbage bags and threw them away in different things around his apartment complex. And so the murder weapon obviously had not been found for 13 years. And Todd wasn't even on the radar until Kayla Brown tells investigators while she's being transported to the hospital in an ambulance.
Right. And the families are so grateful that it was eventually solved.
Well, and just the foresight that Kayla had to be coherent enough to give investigators all these details. Like, she's amazing.
She is. She's got this incredible survival skill, this ability to endure all of the very vicious, brutal, violent acts that are perpetrated on her in her captivity, which We're actually just going to share a little bit about her captivity now because it's relevant to her story and
Sure.
and also gives us a look into Todd, a deeper look into Todd. And she shares her story very openly. Kayla has not been quiet. She's not been silent. She stood up in court and looked him right in the eyes. So she's been very, very brave. So Amy, let's just tell a little bit about her captivity. We're not going to get into the gruesome details of the assaults and the rapes. We are going to note that they happened. But let's also mention some of the very unusual things that happened while she was being held captive, like posts and reviews and purchases. So
Yeah.
do you want to tell us a little bit about her captivity? Again, this is her recounting of the story, her retelling, and we believe victims. We do not believe Todd's story, which is the opposite of hers in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, she's immediately taken hostage. Yeah. She describes herself as being in this like state of shock watching Charlie go down in front of her, and Todd immediately locks her, chains her into the Connex. He allows her to come out twice a day, and he lets her go to the house. I guess it's kind of a garage.
It's like the garage with a living space above it.
Yeah. I mean, twice a day, and he has her eat, but then we talk about consent, and Todd's version is that he never raped Kayla. And I will just say Sarah and I's stance on this is there's no way someone that's being held against their will in this situation can give consent.
Absolutely.
And so she does things to survive. Survival is not consent.
And by things we mean she doesn't fight back. She doesn't
Todd
push.
makes it very clear to her that if she doesn't do what he wants, there's no purpose for him to keep her alive.
Yeah, that he will kill her.
Yeah.
That she knows he's capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just horrific. She's chained up while she's upstairs in this garage building loft.
She's held somehow from either handcuffs, rope, like it kind of varies in some of the storytelling.
Either way, police find like bolts and things that were fastened to the wall that she was chained. She was
used to hold. They were used to hold her still.
Yeah, and she was chained like a dog. I mean, that's what rescuers describe her.
Yeah, that's the terminology they use.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, they use it compassionately.
Yeah,
they're not trying to refer to her as a dog or an animal. They're saying,
or to denigrate her in any way.
Yeah, they were actually having a very hard time explaining how difficult it was to see her.
Yeah,
chained up like that, and so they're finding the best words they can, to describe the captivity she was held in. So we're not using that word callously.
No.
That's how it was relayed. So also during her captivity, in Todd's brain somehow, he thinks that he says he thinks that he's like taking care of her. He's feeding her, lets her go to the bathroom once a day, and places a bucket in the Connex in case she needs to use it.
Oh my goodness.
Right? And he gives her little things. I hate
how he thinks this is generous.
Well, whether he thinks it or not, that's how he spins it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so gross. We just keep using that word because there's truly no other word. But he gives her little things here and there, like notebooks, books to read. Mm-hmm. He gives her pens and so that she can write, and she does write notes to him, which are found later in the discovery of all this evidence. But to be clear, she is playing into Todd's ego, in an effort to survive. She's basically saying like, hey, you gave me this notebook. I wrote you a note.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, also too, I think she's doing the exact same thing Christy, who was his 14-year-old rape victim, did, trying to placate to him.
Right, because he was obviously only violent in terms of ending someone's life if he felt like they were an immediate threat or if they weren't a woman. Like,
they disrespected him somehow.
He wanted to keep these women around. And actually, John Douglas states that Charlie and Johnny were probably killed because they were just in his way
of
getting to the women. So there are a couple unusual things that happens while Kayla is in captivity. And what I mean by unusual is Todd takes it upon himself to have Kayla log into her Facebook and decides to post for her, which her family notes.
It's not her.
It's not her. This is not anything that she would say or how she would word it. And one of the posts that's made on Facebook, although I'm not clear if he posted it on his page or on Kayla's page, I'm kind of unclear, but he posts, we know it was him ultimately, no matter where it was posted, a very chilling last verse of the song Hotel California, which I want to just read really quick. Is that okay?
Sure.
The lyrics read, "Last time I remember, I was running for the door, had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax," said the night man, "we are programmed to receive. You can check out anytime you'd like, but you can never leave." This is very telling for a reason, two reasons. The first one I'm going to say is there is some part of Todd's sick, dark mind where he thinks he's holding Kayla kind of at a hotel that she can never leave, but he's treating her as a guest.
Oh,
Which is so twisted. I mean, it's so hard to find words to describe it.
I mean, our vocabulary is really short because there's he's vile, he's disgusting, he's a monster.
Absolutely vile. Now, what's very interesting to me about the specific use of the Hotel California song actually is going to lead me to part 2 of what I was saying. He believes in his mind, which is kind of that he's smarter than everyone else. Right?
All criminals think they are smarter.
Well, all psychopaths, sociopaths, those who premeditate these crimes, right? He does this thing that I'm going to kind of refer to now and divert a little bit. Now, Amy, when I first shared this with you, you hadn't heard this.
I hadn't.
So I'm going to tell you just briefly a little bit about the Amazon review killer.
And truthfully, I didn't know this was a thing, and I stopped reading it so that you guys can blind reaction together.
Right. Amy's going to hear this all in real time. So, and a part of my research was just getting on YouTube and looking at all of the videos that are on there. Todd's arrest, Kayla's rescue, Todd's interrogation, all of that is available online to watch. And I wanted to watch it because I wanted to get the full story, right?
There's like 50 hours of
there's a lot.
Police video of him confessing.
There's a lot. So in one of these searches, it kind of popped up underneath like the main search, the Amazon review killer, but it had a picture of Todd. So I clicked on it. And I believe when I said the words Amazon review killer to you, you had not heard of this.
No.
I had not heard of the Amazon review killer. So I was confused about why they were correlating it. So whomever created this like video and a couple people then like dispersed it or also created videos around it, referenced him as the Amazon review killer, which did not stick. That didn't catch on, right?
No. He wasn't known nationwide as that.
And that's very important to note because, and I'm not coming for anyone who dubbed their video the Amazon review killer. However, police have been very clear that it's no longer a practice to identify or give serial killers like catchy titles, right? Like the Toy Box Killer, Jack the Ripper, BTK. There's a practice to not do that kind of like identification with serial killers because it gives them attention.
Yeah.
Which a lot of them want.
Yeah. So they're trying to move away from that to just focus on the victims.
Right. They're just using his name, Todd Kohlhepp. So again, I'm not trying to criticize someone who maybe thought that was a catchy phrase to use for him, but it's a very fascinating part of the story. And it will give us just a little bit of insight into his mind, but also hopefully just a little break from the really dark like captivity and rape and abuse that we have to discuss. Although like this isn't funny now knowing that this was Todd, but Todd decided that it was cool or funny to write reviews on items that he had bought on Amazon that he used to perpetrate some of these crimes, or we assume he did. So I want to tie it really quick. I'm going to start kind of at the end. Todd wrote a review on a set of 5 padlocks that he purchased off of Amazon.
Oh my goodness, stop.
Yes, and those were
the 5 padlocks probably on the Connex.
That's the belief. Yep, that's the belief, is that they were the 5 of the locks that were used to hold the Connex shut. But he posts on Amazon, and I don't have this one printed off, so I'm just going to speak from my notes. He says, "These locks are amazing. They're fantastic. My locks have locks. It's as locked down as Hotel California."
No.
So in hindsight, not that anyone would have been able to red flag that and like put those pieces together, but he's like using this as a game.
He's almost like foreshadowing.
It is. He's using it as a game. So now I'm going to read you some of the other
Hollywood
reviews.
couldn't even write that.
Hollywood did not write that. So he leaves a review. We'll just start with Husqvarna. It's a little bit blurry on here, but it is a 455 Rancher 20-inch 55cc 2-stroke gas-powered chainsaw. That was a really long way to say chainsaw. Okay, but his review was 5 stars. Works excellent. Getting the neighbor to stand still while ... Works excellent. Getting the neighbor to stand still while you chase him is hard enough without having the use of this chainsaw.
What?
Next one.
Stop.
He reviews the master lock hidden.
Is he
shackle
trying to
padlock.
be funny, do you think? Is he trying to be like the what is that? The sugar-free gummy bears?
Yes. Well, I mean, that's what the belief is now, that he thinks
Okay.
it's funny. Like you said, I think he was being like, thinks he's cheeky and clever and putting this foreshadowing in there.
Yeah, but also having some factual information. Like there's no evidence, right, that he chased a neighbor with a chainsaw.
Right. Yes. And there is commentary on these reviews where users are just saying like, haha, that's super funny. Like it was being taken as a joke.
Okay.
So there was
So nobody's reporting
Nope.
his comments to Amazon to have them like removed or to
Nope.
have.
This was all discovered after the fact.
Oh.
Okay, so he reviews the master lock hidden shackle padlock. Now, this is just one, so this is a different review than the 5 padlocks, okay? 5 stars, works great. Also, if someone talks back, go old school on them by putting this in a sock and beating them. They will not appreciate the hardened steel like you will. Works great on a shipping container. ...
No.
He posted that September 13th, 2014. So that was actually
A year before.
a year before Megan and Johnny and almost 2 years before Kayla's rescue. So he was posting this stuff before he even had these victims.
Oh my goodness.
Unless-
Now, here is the theory though, because there is a big span between Superbikes of 2003 and Johnny and
Megan in 2015.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a theory out there, and I think we'll I think we'll shallow dive that in a little bit.
Briefly touch on.
Yeah, and I mentioned this to you, Amy, like kind of be interested in doing like a little follow-up to this episode. Like it's just a short podcast sometime later to kind of give like alternate theories and where Todd's trying to take the story now that he's already been convicted. But let me just finish these reviews for you. Also in September 2014, so it looks like he actually made these purchases and these reviews all on the same day or within a very close time frame. And if he did make them on the same day, which they're all dated the same day, as I'm reading them right here, that means he bought all of these items together.
Okay, stop right here. Because you get those surveillance footage of people buying like a hammer, a tarp,
bleach,
yeah,
trash bags,
like all at the same time, and it's kind of flagged. There's security footage, like they know where their car's going.
They're buying a murder kit.
Yeah, like what is this? Like
just wait. Okay. He posts a review on a Pentagon fixed blade satin polished dual edge. So this is like a pocket knife.
Okay.
This one's only 4 stars though. Haven't stabbed anyone yet.
Oh. ...
Yet ... But I am keeping the dream alive. And when I do, it will be with a quality tool like this.
But when I do, what is the date on that?
September 13th, 2014, which according to these screenshots, now these are actually submitted in the court documents. Like this is actually evidence submitted. And so the court documents are a little tough to read because keep in mind, like they're copies of copies.
Sure.
But they all have the same date on them here. So again, either he purchased them all together and left them reviews in a group or purchased them previously and then left all the reviews one night.
One night he was just reviewing.
Either way, there's more.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
And maybe you don't know because you did deep dive into the court docs.
I did.
So the pocket knife that supposedly Johnny pulled on Todd, was that found?
No, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Here is my answer. I found this interesting because in all, like the autopsy reports, the coroner reports, all the police reports, Johnny is not found with a knife, around a knife. There's nothing in or close by him. So either one of two things had to happen. He pulled a knife on Todd, according to Todd, and then Todd shot him and then took the knife, or it didn't happen at all.
Yeah. I only asked because I wondered if this same exact knife was found near Johnny, that Todd had bought and kind of staged his story.
That's a good question, but not from anything that I read. I do want to point out, like, I'm looking at the photo of this as I'm reading the review, and it's a pretty short blade. So I don't know that this would be a great choice if you were going to stab someone.
Sure.
But we don't also have any stabbing victims, at least at this point.
Yeah, that we know of.
Not that I can tell. The next review is on an SOG entrenching tool, which is a folding shovel. 5 stars. Keep it in the car for when you need to hide the bodies. And you left your full-size shovel at home. Does not come with a midget, which would be nice.
Oh my goodness.
So not only is this like type of posting, like he's clearly like being what he thinks is clever or funny, but he's also offensive.
Oh, totally.
That's not a term that we use anymore. And he has no regard for other human beings. Last review, the master padlock, high security lock, 5 stars, solid locks. I have 5 on a shipping container. It won't stop them, but it sure will slow them down until they are too old to care.
No.
Suggesting that he would be
keeping someone super long term
until they're too old to care. So
thank goodness Kayla had her cell phone on her.
Absolutely.
Thank goodness she wrote on Facebook where she was headed.
Right.
And police knew a starting point.
Yeah, they had somewhere to work from. He's cold. He's calculating. He thinks he's funny. We're not going to refer to him in this retelling of the story or in any future one as the Amazon review killer. But it does pop up in the research, in the YouTube videos. And I printed those from court documents. So those were actually submitted as evidence that he has these types of tools, materials, and is, if you look at them objectively, it looks like he's planning to kill somebody.
Yeah.
So there is your story about the Amazon review killer. There was another interesting document that I found in the court documents. I'll just touch on it very briefly, but I clicked on them because I was curious why they were in there. And this document was labeled Costco receipts. Now, there is hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation about this case and discovery. So again, it just kind of stood out to me. And I actually read through the receipts, and it took me a second. I was trying to figure out why they're relevant. And then I went back and I actually started Googling items on these receipts that I wasn't immediately recognizing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the search warrant for the Costco receipts stated that it was suspicious that he was buying female items.
I'm going to tell you what they were, actually.
Yeah.
I had to Google some of this stuff. I might not have caught everything.
Sure.
But what I did catch was on the 19th of September, Todd purchased, amongst a ton of dog food.
Yeah, so this would all be for Kayla.
Yes, or for what he was sharing with Kayla, right? He purchased 2 14 packs of batteries and a bunch of other stuff, of course. Like I said, dog food. He actually buys a very large quantity of food, like 3 bags of chicken tenders.
Yeah.
Anyway, he also purchases 2 Kirkland, large, big containers of Sleep Aid and Excedrin. Hey, and then on the 12th of October, he returns and he purchases a ladies' multi-sport head, and then it cuts off. So I'm assuming it's a headband. Or maybe a cap, a hat, not totally clear. It cuts off, so it could be several things, but Googling it didn't bring up anything. He purchases something that says soft terry cloth cotton. I'm assuming these are towels. And he purchases 2 king-size blankets, a soft shell jacket, Deerform ladies' booties, and then a few other things, which include 3 pails of damp rid high capacity. So I Googled that one because I wasn't sure what it was. And they're actually these containers full of some substance that you place in a area that is high humidity and no airflow.
Like a Connex.
Like a Connex, exactly. And they're supposed to pull some of the humidity out of the air and dry it. So he was using these in the Connex because there's no windows and no airflow and no light. He's using them to absorb some of the
moisture
humidity, and we
from her breathing.
Yeah, and not only that, but remember, we're in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Very humid. We're in the South. and it's a highly wooded area. It was very damp and dusk and dirty in there. He also purchases a very large, like almost industrial sized flashlight, and then 4 more 14 packs of batteries, which I'm not sure maybe what his plan was with those. It's assumed that he was buying all of those to power like his flashlights and stuff he was using in the dark to retrieve Kayla and bring her into the home and walk around the property.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, he had a girlfriend, right?
Either way, like all of these batteries were also found on site. And so everything he's purchasing in these receipts is found at the location. So he's like stockpiling batteries. He does also buy on this order large quantities of Aleve and mucus relief. So that combined with the sleep aids and Excedrins he bought the month before, I'm hoping.
He's like medicating her.
I think that they're more for himself. I say that because I don't know that any of his behavior indicates that he actually cares about how she's feeling. But the reason I wrote it down and why I'm pointing it out is because I hope he was suffering and miserable. I hope he was miserable. So that is kind of the wrap up of the Amazon reviews and the Costco receipts that were found and submitted into evidence as a part of his case. So, Amy, I know we're putting a lot of information out there and we're trying to tell the story in order. There's so much to tell. And again, maybe we do tell a follow up to this where, we talk about his post-arrest.
Or if listeners had questions that want to know more, like we can deep dive into their questions.
Yeah, we can do just another little follow-up that would be kind of like what he's done since then. But keep in mind, the day of Kayla's rescue, he's immediately arrested, right? I had mentioned he's never, ever again free. He goes and interviews with the police and tells them everything in his own disgusting way, where he's victim blaming.
Well, he's very mechanical the way he tells.
He says that.
Yeah,
he says he was mechanical.
Yeah, he's just, here the facts, like just no emotion, just I did this.
And as part of his confession, though, is saying, but I did it because I was forced. I was pushed.
So ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It is gross. I will just, I want to throw in there as we wrap up just a little bit more insight into Reggie. I'll just touch on this quickly because, again, kind of back to the beginning, I feel like it's very relevant. The way that they exemplify their behaviors to each other and their interactions with each other is very telling that their relationship was very, like you said, toxic, but very codependent. She had no control over this child, so she just kind of gave in to him, if you will. So she is interviewed after he's arrested. I believe that this was before he was sentenced or right around the time that he was sentenced. But she does say in interviews, he killed people because they embarrassed him. The reporter stops her and says, like, mean to him? What do you mean?
Well, also, that's not a justification.
Right. And then she goes on to justify that nobody wants to be embarrassed. They embarrassed him. She then also says things like, I don't want him to be referred to or dubbed a serial killer. I don't want that to be his final story. Keep in mind, he didn't kill Daly.
What?
She then says to the victims' families, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. You see a brief moment of very genuine remorse and sadness that this happened, but then continues on to say, but he wasn't a serial killer. There was no time in between, which perhaps she's missing the fact that Superbike and then the Coxies and Kayla were years and years apart, but maybe she's also isolating those incidences in her head.
Also, a serial killer doesn't have to kill daily to be...
Well, the actual definition of a serial killer is someone who kills 3 people or more with breaks in between and cooling off periods.
Yeah.
So it's actually like the definition of a serial killer, which some people argue back and forth what the actual definition is, but that's irrelevant right now. I'm relaying what his mother's perception of this is. She doesn't want him to be coined a serial killer. She doesn't want that to be the end of the story. She does say in the same interviews that Todd was violent. Todd threatened to kill her. And so in his childhood, she would sleep with her door locked and lock his door. So in the same story...
Oh, my goodness.
In the same story, she's saying, I was terrified of him, but also, please don't label him.
Oh.
It's one of the things about the story that bothered me the most. And you know that because
You came from Reggie hard.
I did come from Reggie. When we were first kind of like mapping out how we wanted to do this, I was so irritated with her that I brought it up a lot, and I've wound down a little bit. But again, keep in mind when she writes that letter to the judge back when he was 15 years old, she says, doesn't anyone care that he walked her home? And then lastly, in one of the interviews, she's talking about that rape, and she says, Todd went down and got her and brought her home. The reporter immediately interrupts her because she's going to then tell the story, right? He interrupts her and says, you mean at gunpoint? And there's a long pause before Reggie says, well, yes. he did.
So she didn't want to admit all of the negative facts.
Yeah, she's trying to like separate
justify
them out.
Yeah, and you can't separate them out. And I think as a mom, I think we've talked about this before, I think she has the delusion of the fact that he's her son. She loves him. She thinks of him a certain way. But the reality is he isn't that son that everybody else in her life probably had.
Yeah, that she didn't get to have.
Yeah.
Which is also self-serving, right? In and of
Sure.
itself. I do just want to make a note, and maybe someday we'll talk about it more, but their codependent, disgusting, toxic relationship continues after his arrest as they make phone calls to each other and write letters. He even sues her at one point. He tells her he doesn't want her in his life. She disowns him at one point. But they continue to talk up until her death, which was just not too long after. So just to wrap up the little last bit of this, let's talk about his sentence that he received. Will you just kind of fill us in?
Yeah, on May 26, 2017, Todd Kohlhepp pleads guilty to 7 counts of murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of criminal assault. He was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences plus 60 years without the possibility of parole.
He stuck it there for life. Although, while that sentence seems long and well-deserved, we should say that the death penalty was taken off the table. He was actually up for it.
Yeah, because he pled guilty.
And he gave the information that they needed, the facts.
They couldn't find the Coxies at first, and so he had to leave police to where they were
buried, yeah.
And they were just deeper than what police had initially thought they were.
Yeah, they needed all that heavy equipment in order to recover their bodies. Now, Todd has continued this story on post-arrest. He's tried to inform several sources, that there are more bodies. Another story for another time, because we want to wrap up this story today with his sentencing. But he leaves breadcrumbs all over the place. Like, there are more bodies, 2 people that he killed after they harassed him. He alludes that he was a part of a hunt club, which is basically a club that they would meet, go down to Mexico together and kill drug dealers. Again, we don't want to tie this into our story today. We want to leave it where it's at. But with every story that we're telling in this podcast, we are just going to end with kind of what are our individual takeaways from this story, how it relates to real estate, or what we kind of took from it from there, and or, the individuals that we discussed. But Amy, let's just hear your takeaway real quick.
I mean, for me, my biggest takeaway from this case is the bravery of the women, the victims that, Christy showed bravery and foresight that a 14-year-old usually doesn't.
Yeah, isn't like naturally capable of.
Yeah, like her strength was amazing. Megan's strength was amazing. Even though she was eventually killed, I think she had that grit and determination, like, I'm going to fight through this. And he can either kill me or whatever, but I'm going to put up a fight.
Yeah.
And then Kayla and her bravery of being coherent enough and lucid enough to give police all the details that eventually led to closure for 6 other families.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Well, 7 if you count Charlie. But, it's amazing because Todd wasn't tied to the other 6.
Yep, he wasn't.
And as far as a real estate standpoint, I'm super grateful that we have background checks.
Yeah.
And that hopefully systems are in place that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, agreed. That's a really good one, just to go back and note that Utah has done an excellent job in how they screen applicants and what their rules are. So we really do appreciate that. That was a great takeaway. Mine, I really thought about this long and hard. I wanted to say so much, but I narrowed this down. My takeaway is just a tip, like a safety tip out there, not just in real estate, but in any interaction you have with an employer, we'll call it, someone that you've agreed to work for. Research who you're working with. In a day and age of technology where a lot of information is accessible at our fingertips, do a little bit of due diligence for your own safety and protection. There were agents that worked with Todd, and Todd hired the Coxies and Kayla. Actually, I don't think that we mentioned even Kayla had worked for Todd cleaning homes before the day in which he invited and asked Charlie to also come. Whether you're a hired hands, you're doing contracting work, cleaning for someone individual. If you're working for one individual human being at their house, at their property, in their office, research who you're considering working with. In this case, he was a registered sex offender and the information was accessible. And I'm not victim blaming anyone for not thinking to go research that, because as humans, there's sort of an agreement amongst us that we're all decent people until you prove us wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like we assume the best in others. And so they didn't have any indication or reason to go research, but I'm proposing as 2024 and moving forward in our lives, raising our children, caring for people that we work with, our family members, let's put it out there. Take some time, especially if you have an odd interaction or a gut feeling, just take the time to look up, who am I working for? Maybe get some information. And if something doesn't read right, walk away.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you. So we're going to leave this story where it's at. This one was tough to tell, but interesting to research. There's more to the story. And I just want to recommend, if you decide to go research this, watch the documentaries that we referred to. Just keep in mind, they are very clear, pretty graphic, some of them, and they tell the material respectfully, but just proceed with caution. We enjoyed the research on this because it was so dynamic. Like there was so much to read and to tell. So thank you for letting us tell our story. But we're going to wrap up case number 2, Todd Kohlhepp, the real estate serial killer.
All right. See you guys next time.
Talk to you soon.